know I stand on business. Why you even letting somebody play with me like that? Why you letting somebody play with me like that?
King Harris always told the world he was standing on business. But the moment those prison doors slammed shut behind him, that image crumbled. A gang leader has now stepped forward with a real story of what went down inside, and it's nothing like the fearless persona Harris showed online. Tonight, we uncover why the so-called Prince of Trap is actually living in fear behind bars. King Harris believed his family name, fame, luxury cars, and music legacy would shield him from the harsh realities of street life. But reality hit harder than anyone imagined. According to an Atlanta gang leader, Harris simply isn't built for the lifestyle he's been trying to portray. The reason he's allegedly terrified in jail is not just shocking, it's humiliating for someone who spent years loudly claiming to stand on business. This isn't just another wild tale about a celebrity's kid losing control. It's a powerful warning about the brutal clash between privilege and the unforgiving politics of the streets. The most shocking part, the moment you'll hear before we're done, is how a gang figure humiliated King Harris so badly that inmates began laughing at his name instead of fearing it. But before we get to that bombshell, let's rewind to what brought us here. Because make no mistake, the truth you're about to hear is nothing like the image King Harris wants the world to believe. It all began with an infamous traffic stop. On the surface, it looked routine, a young man in a BMW making an illegal turn. But within seconds, everything spiraled into chaos. Officers quickly realized this wasn't just a minor driving mistake. There was a warrant. There were weapons. And suddenly, the son of Atlanta royalty found himself face down in the harsh reality of police procedure. In that instant, the fantasy shattered. This wasn't music video bravado or Instagram tough talk. It was the cold bite of handcuffs snapping around his wrists, the heavy smell of weed filling the car, and officers warning him to keep his hands still, or else. Here's the surprising part. King didn't break down. He didn't lash out or throw a tantrum like many expected. Instead, he held his composure, at least on the surface. Even the cops took note of it.
You have been advised you're being detained, okay? Do anything other than what I'm telling you. And I mean, you see.
Keeping cool during a traffic stop is one thing. Surviving the hierarchy of prison is something else entirely. And this is where the gang leader revelation cuts straight through the illusion. The tough image King tried to project the idea that he was a real one hungry for respect collapsed the moment whispers started spreading inside about how he actually behaved in holding. But before we expose that humiliation, let's pause on why King's obsession with his street persona is so baffling to begin with. Even people who usually defend young rappers couldn't make sense of it. Commentators were left shaking their heads. And in his raw, unfiltered way, DJ Academics laid it out for the world.
I'm so puzzled why King feels the desire, need, want to be considered a street dude that badly. Why is he so obsessed with the struggle, with the life of being a street dude? Street dudes ain't really.
Think about that for a moment. The son of a multimillionaire born into privilege, obsessed with proving he belongs to a world most people risk everything to escape. And then came the public meltdowns, the cracks that showed just how fragile his image really was. One of the biggest moments was his clash with his own father, T. The cameras caught it all, every word. And what spilled out wasn't strength or confidence. It was raw insecurity masked as defiance.
I stand on business. Why you even letting somebody play with me like that? Why you letting somebody play with me like that?
Over and over, King shouted about standing on business. But to his father, and to millions watching online, it didn't look like a man demanding respect. It looked like a young man desperate to prove he wasn't soft. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly why the gang leader's words cut so deep behind prison walls. There's no Instagram live. No viral clip to spin the story. There's only survival and reputation. When King walked in, his family name carried weight, but his own name did not. Whispers started immediately. And according to insiders, the fear was written all over his face. That's when the stage was set for the breaking point. A figure from Atlanta's street world, someone with no loyalty to the Harris family, came forward with vivid details about how King allegedly broke down when confronted. The description was so raw, so humiliating, that it spread like wildfire among everyone following the saga. And the worst part? It wasn't just the inmates laughing. The streets outside were, too. To them, King's obsession with crashing out looked less like courage and more like cosplay. So when that reality check came in the form of the gang leader's words, the entire illusion collapsed. Buckle up, because in the next part, We'll dive into exactly what was said, how it spread, and why King Harris now finds himself walking a dangerous line between embarrassment and outright threat behind those walls. Here's the part most people don't understand about jail politics. None of the outside world matters. Not how much money you have. Not how many followers you've got on Instagram. And definitely not who your parents are. Inside those cold, fluorescent-lit cells, the only thing that counts is how you carry yourself the moment you walk through the doors. And that's exactly where King Harris stumbled. The mask slipped almost immediately. Sources close to the intake process say he didn't look like the tough guy flexing on social media. He looked like a kid who had just realized his father's fame couldn't buy him respect. What makes this even more tragic is the contrast between his reality and the way he spoke in public. Time and time again, King painted himself as fearless, unshakable, someone destined to command respect. But then, in one offhand comment, his own mother, Tiny, tore that image apart and revealed more than King ever meant the world to know.
King changed for other reasons and he ain't got good sense. You see what I'm saying?
Did Sonic not give us a question?
Everybody know King ain't got, you know what I'm saying, he ain't got all his marks.
That was his mother speaking, not a critic, not a blogger, his own mother calling him out. And when you set that beside his father's frustration, with T.I. literally telling him straight to his face, it paints a picture more powerful than any headline ever could.
Wanted to go over there. You cried and cried and cried when you couldn't go over there.
We done got big house, big yard, nothing to do.
But you want to be from the ghetto, so...
Now you begin to see the full picture. King Harris wasn't raised in the trenches, he chased them. He wanted validation so badly that he tried to manufacture it. And here's the cruel irony. Real street dudes don't respect that. They can smell it a mile away. They know the difference between someone forced into survival and someone who chooses danger because it looks cool. This is why, when the gang leader spoke out about King, people listened. He wasn't just clowning, he was exposing what many already suspected, that King's stand on business persona collapses the moment the cameras stop rolling. But let's zoom out for a second. Why does this matter so much? Why does the downfall of a celebrity's son grab so much attention? The answer: hypocrisy. For years, T.I. positioned himself as both a reformed hustler and a moral compass for the culture. He preached growth, warned against the pitfalls of the streets, and urged young men to choose better. Yet here was his own son sprinting toward those very traps, with a smugness that mocked everything his father claimed to stand for. This is the same T.I. who famously told young men to expeditiously take accountability for their choices. But when his own bloodline began to spiral, the image cracked. And instead of a strong, united front, the world saw something else, a father and son screaming at each other on Instagram Live. King shouted, "Why are you letting somebody play with me like that?" While T.I. stood there, looking worn out and exhausted. For the streets, it was comedy. For the family, humiliation. And for King, it was a preview of what was waiting for him inside. Because in prison, there's always someone ready to test you. Always someone watching to see if your talk matches your walk. And when the gang leader revealed how King allegedly responded to those first tests, the internet lit up, not because people were shocked, but because it confirmed what they already believed. But before we get to that moment, we need to talk about the culture that enabled it. Platforms and bloggers played a huge role in feeding King's delusions. Take DJ Academics, for example. He turned King's petty arrests into full-blown storylines, half mocking him, half egging him on. At one point, he even joked about what King would have to do to be considered a real gangster.
Yo, King! Gotta drop a body or something, bro!
Now, obviously, Academics was joking, but think about the effect. When millions of viewers are laughing, when clips go viral of people saying, "You're not a real one unless you escalate," it plants a dangerous seed. For someone like King, desperate to prove himself, those words weren't just jokes, they were validation. So he doubled down. He lashed out at his father. He declared himself a man who stands on business. He strutted through Atlanta, puffing out his chest. But the second that cell door slammed shut, all that energy evaporated. And this is why the gang leader's words cut so deep, because they stripped away the final layer of his facade. According to that gang leader, King wasn't feared. He wasn't respected. He was scared. And in the cutthroat world of prison, fear is blood in the water. But here's the part most people don't talk about, the psychological toll of that humiliation. When you spend years convincing the world you're a lion, but the first time you step into the jungle, you freeze, it doesn't just bruise your ego. It destroys your credibility. And for King Harris, credibility was the only currency he had left. But we're only scratching the surface. Because in the next part, we break down exactly what this gang leader said, how the story spread through both the prison and the streets, and why it permanently changed how people see King Harris. Part 1 was the build-up, the car stop, the family drama, the online hype. Part 2 is the explosion. The moment the illusion shattered, and the streets got their confirmation. King Harris isn't who he claims to be. And once we go there, the real question becomes, can King ever recover? Or is he doomed to live under the shadow of a reputation destroyed before it even had a chance to begin? Here's the brutal truth. In prison, gossip spreads faster than contraband. One whispered story in intake can turn into a full-blown legend by lunchtime. And when the gang leader spoke up about King Harris, he didn't just toss out a few remarks. He painted a picture so vivid, so humiliating, that even people who once defended King stopped trying. Here's what insiders say really went down. When King first entered custody, he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who believed his last name alone would protect him. He wasn't shackled by fear, at least not at first. But according to the gang leader, that confidence vanished the moment he faced his first real test. It started small, a shove in the hallway, a question barked in his face. You standing on business, right? Let's see it then. And instead of pushing back, instead of standing his ground, the gang leader claims King froze. That single moment of hesitation was all it took. In prison, hesitation is weakness, and weakness spreads fast. By the end of the day, the whispers were everywhere. The self-proclaimed tough guy was scared, and the irony is hard to miss. On the outside, King Harris had been shouting at his father, demanding respect. But inside, respect was the one thing he couldn't command.
You know I stand on business. Why you even letting somebody play with me like that? Why you letting somebody play with me like that? Why you let?
Yet on the inside, when real business was put in front of him, King couldn't deliver. And here's where the gang leader's account turns brutal. He didn't just say King froze, he claimed King tried to talk his way out. That he started name-dropping. That he reminded people who his father was. Let that sink in. In jail, the one thing you can't do is lean on privilege. You can't talk your way into respect. You can't drop names and expect protection. All it does is confirm that you don't have respect of your own. And once that image of fear took root, it spread like wildfire. By dinner, King wasn't T.I.'s son. He was the punchline. Inmates were mocking him, imitating him, replaying the moment he allegedly stuttered under pressure. That's what made the gang leader's revelation so devastating. It wasn't about paperwork. It wasn't about charges. It wasn't even about whether King had money for commissary. It was about heart. And according to the man who saw it firsthand, King Harris had none when it mattered most. Now here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because humiliation in prison doesn't just bruise pride, it creates danger. The moment word spread that King was scared, he became a target. Not necessarily for violence, at least not right away, but for manipulation. Guys started plotting how to test him again, how to use his fear against him. And if you think this sounds exaggerated, just look at the pattern. Plenty of rappers' kids and celebrity offspring have tried to prove themselves in tough environments. 9 times out of 10, it ends the same way: exposure. The same confusion academics once voiced is the same confusion the streets feel now. But in jail, confusion doesn't stay confusion. It turns into ridicule. And that ridicule didn't stay locked behind those walls. It leaked out, through whispers, through phone calls, through the grapevine that connects the prison yard to the outside world. By the time the gang leader went public with his comments, people were already buzzing with the story. King Harris was not built for the life he claimed. The fallout was immediate. Blogs picked it up. Social media ran with it. Memes flooded timelines. And the cruelest twist of all, fans began resurfacing old clips of King shouting at his father or rapping about standing on business, overlaying them with jokes about his alleged breakdown in jail. The very words King once used to prop himself up became the weapons used against him. But some of you might be asking, why would a gang leader even expose this? Why break the code and publicly clown a young man like that? The answer is simple: credibility. For that gang leader, exposing King wasn't just about humiliating a celebrity's son. It was about proving a point, a reminder that the streets don't bend for fame, and that money, status, or family ties don't erase the rules. By calling King out, he boosted his own reputation. He made it clear he was the one who checked T.I.'s son. And in that twisted world, that's real power. King Harris's story isn't just about one mistake. It's a brutal reminder that reputation in the streets can take years to build and seconds to destroy. From privilege to punchline, his downfall shows just how fast the internet and the inside world can collide to strip away an image. But the question remains, can King ever bounce back? Or is this the stain that will follow him forever? Don't miss what comes next. Hit that subscribe button.